Hey, it's Kaiser and Guy here with another Pixel Pals. We're Pixie, we're Pally, we roam the back alleys,
Lyrics, you got to work on those.
I know, there's something there. That's not it.
Having lunch in the galley, I don't know.
That might work, although dark back alleys works for today's topic.
Yes, well,
The
wait,
25th,
what?
yes, the 25th anniversary of Mortal Kombat. You know, people fight in back alleys. It works. It's a great segue. Let's move on.
Is it?
Yes. It
Okay,
is.
all right. All right, if you say so, sure, let's go with it.
So, 25 years ago, in a dark back alley. Sorry.
All right.
The first Mortal Kombat game emerged. Okay, it may not have emerged in a back alley. I'm sure it was an arcade somewhere where it first hits.
I think it was Chicago where it emerged.
Which is like the back alley of cities, right?
Cue the angry Chicagoans at us.
I'm kidding. Much love.
The Wookiee Chicagoans will be raging at us.
So yes, so we have had a long history with Mortal Kombat since the beginning.
Mhm.
And so, Guy, where did you first get introduced into Mortal Kombat?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I'm trying to remember where I first played Mortal Kombat. And it's like I can't remember my first arcade experience. I definitely, though, do remember my home console experience because that was such a big deal. There was a Super Nintendo one which looked better, but had the downside of they didn't have blood in it, which I don't understand how you can make a Mortal Kombat game in the first place. And they had sweat instead of blood and like neutered basically every fatality. And then you had the Genesis version, which you did have the blood. It looked a little worse, but you did have the blood, but you had to input that in via a code. I had neither. I had the Sega CD version.
So was there a code for blood on the Sega CD, or was it unlocked for the get-go?
No, it was uncensored, and even had the whole Mortal Kombat music video.
Chun, chun,
that
chun,
the-
chun, chun, chun,
Yeah,
chun,
yeah.
chun.
Yeah, the Immortals, Mortal Kombat, and so that had that before, and that beautiful pixelated four-color Sega CD graphics that they were, and so yeah, that was my version on it. But I remember like the big thing on that, even though it was probably one of the better versions, every time you put in a finishing move, it would do like this long delay. So it's like I never knew if I froze the game or not. So it's like, well, it locked. That's great. Oh wait, I did a fatality. Cool. Okay, and that was Sega CD back in the day.
Oh yes, they had to access whatever part of the CD that was on, and then make room in the memory, and then load it up, and then trigger it, and it was not as instantaneous as things are today.
Fatalities were serious business back then.
Well, you know, it takes a lot of time to load up 125 rib cages, 500 legs,
19
250
arms.
Yeah, to spew out of the
So
body.
over the top and ridiculous, but that was Mortal Kombat. I do remember Mortal Kombat 2. I was working at Blockbuster Video at the time, and my manager and I would go to the Super Kmart, and they had a little arcade area in there, and we'd play Mortal Kombat 2. Mostly I'd watch him, but I'd play every now and then. And then certainly Nintendo at that point wised up and it's like, okay, we're going to have blood. So they had the better looking version, no blood codes, and all the blood that you could want. So
See, my first introduction into Mortal Kombat was on 7th. There's a Shell station, and they used to have a little eating area and a couple arcade machines. And one day I was in there, and there's a Mortal Kombat machine, and I'm like, "Oh, this looks interesting." I walk over to it, and I'm watching the attract mode. I'm like, "Okay, I could get into this." And then I put a quarter in. Computer wiped the floor with me, and I'm like, well, let me try a different approach. Try a different character. Quarter in, wipe the floor with me. I'm like, Then this other kid comes in, and I let him take it, and I'm sitting there watching it, and he pulls off a fatality, and I'm like, whoa. I haven't seen that before. And that would kind of started my love for Mortal Kombat. It was like, this is cool. The secrecy around all the moves and the fatalities and everything. There was no internet at the time. It's like, if a magazine didn't publish it, if it wasn't in a strategy guide, you had to know somebody that knew somebody to get the code.
Oh yes, the codes.
Or you called tech support,
Which was us, and that's a whole other story on that. Mine started a little earlier than yours. I joined Williams at that time, later Midway, in 1995. I was in Corsicana. There was a little game company called Trade West, and they're primarily known for Battletoads, Double Dragon, John Elway Quarterback, Solar Jetman, Taboo the Sixth Sense. That's that time less classic.
Super Off-Road Challenge.
Many off-roads.
Yep.
But they had been bought by Williams, who wanted to get into the home market, because originally Acclaim was putting out all the Mortal Kombat home versions, and Williams decided that they wanted to get in on that. So,
well, yeah, they're sitting there seeing how much crazy money that Acclaim's making off of the home licenses. Like, why aren't we getting that money? All of it, not just the cut. So yeah, so then they
exactly
chop, boop, 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 ate up Trade West and absorbed it into their collective.
Just like a Pac-Man. But originally, I was in college at the time, and there was a flyer on one of the bulletin boards that said, "Do you like playing video games?" And that was a redundant question for me. I was like, "Sure." So I went over to the company, and the game in question was Doom for the Super Nintendo. And I went over there and played it, and the testing manager at the time, or customer service manager at the time, was James, and he asked me what I thought of it, and I told him, and me being a gamer, I told him all the ins and outs and everything, and I remember him looking at me, it was just like, and he's like, how would you like a job? And at that point, it was like, I got a golden ticket, music started playing, and it was like the most wondrous thing I could have ever imagined at my 19-year-old self.
Yep.
So, and then he's like, do you want to see something else? And again, it just gets better. I mean, he's basically handed me the keys to the factory at this point. So I go in and I see Mortal Kombat 3 for the first time. And it blew my mind because I was one of the first people to really see it, especially in Corsicana. And that was my job. I tested Mortal Kombat. I had to spend a 9-to-5 day playing the Mortal Kombat arcade game constantly. And then I'd have to compare it against the Super Nintendo and Genesis version. And there was also a Game Boy version and a Game Gear version, which eventually got canceled. And I had to make sure the game was as accurate to the arcade as possible. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, did anything get cut from the home version?
There were a few things. Yeah, there were a few things, and there were a few things that I was able to directly influence, which was really cool. Because, something to show, this is my factory copy, straight from the company version of Mortal Kombat for the Super Nintendo. And yeah, this has been with me the whole time, but they had these EPROMs that were basically about like they're about like yay big, like this much higher than the actual cartridge, but it was like a green circuit board that you'd stick in the Super Nintendo or Genesis like a normal cart, except minus the casing and all that. And some of the biggest changes were originally the graveyard was in Mortal Kombat 3, and they took that out because of memory constraints. And a couple other changes, like I was very because when I talked to people in customer service, they'd always read magazines like EGM or GamePro or something. It's like, I noticed this in the arcade, but this isn't in the home version, because people are very passionate about their fandoms, as I learned over the years.
And I learned with you.
Oh, yes, yeah. And what they'd see was usually about a month or two old. And
right, because back then you couldn't email a copy over. You sent the EPROMs out, and then the magazines had to play them, take their own screenshots, and then put together the article and then release the print. So yeah, that whole process was about 2 months after the time they saw it. So in game development, 2 months is might as well be a year sometimes in as far as content that was in a game that isn't in the game anymore, because things change there. Even when you're in beta, you know things still change,
Oh
drastically.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so was it they cut the levels and some of this stuff was because they didn't want to go up the next cart size because it costs more.
Well, cart size and memory size were always cost prohibitive, and with all those moves and secrets and everything else, because they managed to cram in basically everything that the arcade game was, and it was a pretty accurate home version of the arcade. Um, but yeah, I mean, they did make a few cuts because of memory, and certainly with a lot of changes. One of the small changes I influenced was, how when you beat, like when you win a fighting round, you get those little tokens to let you know that you were the victor of that round. Originally in Mortal Kombat 2, they were just like gold circles. They were supposed to have the dragon logo like the arcades. Again, hearing from fans who would pick out the most minute details, and they're like, "It's not a dragon." So I told them that. I can't remember if they fixed it for the Genesis version, but I know they fixed it for the Super Nintendo version, where it wasn't quite a dragon, but if you kind of squinted, you could believe that it was. But at least they did change it. And like one of the other things I'd forgotten about was, like, in Sub-Zero's name, they didn't have the hyphen. It was just Sub-Zero, one word. And people were like, "What's the big deal?" I'm like, "No, it's a really big deal to these people. You have to do this properly, or people are not going to go for this." And little changes like that. And then finally, after an entire summer of testing, all the various Mortal Kombats, it released. And in a small town like Corsicana, where there's like 23,000 people, I tried to warn the marketing people about how big this game was. I think on one level they got it. On the other hand, I don't think they totally got it, because they weren't gamers and they didn't speak to other gamers. So they didn't, like I said, they got it, but they didn't really anticipate how diehard people were for this game. So when the game released, it shut down Corsicana's phone lines. And operators were calling and like, "Are you guys running a contest?" And it was like, "No, it's just Mortal Kombat." And I remember sometimes the higher ups would come over, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Hello, hello, hello, hello." And they're like, I guess they thought we were just like sipping tea at high time or something like that. It's like we were like sweating because it was me, and I think it was like 4 or 5 of us at that point, and we were just constantly Mortal Kombat and Doom basically released at the same time for Midway, and it was just chaos.
Yeah, I could.
So,
I came on around '98 officially, but I was there hanging out pretty much every day until they finally said, "Would you like a job?" It's like, "Yes,
like a
thank you."
mascot.
Kinda, yeah. The big hairy Midway M or whatever
Exactly.
I was to you guys. But yeah, I remember coming, just hanging out, and I'd sit there. I was the only one that sat and played through Rampage World Tour.
Twisted
And
weird man.
I I love the Rampage games, and so I was determined sitting there playing the arcade machine.
Well, I did too. Not enough to willingly beat it when I wasn't getting paid for it. um,
Let's see, you
but
didn't get the see the well. Did I call you? I think I called everyone
you
in there.
did. You did. You called us when you beat it, like hours and hours later. That
It's
game
like,
is so ungodly long. Um,
but yeah. So, and I didn't get in on Mortal Kombat proper. My first introduction on the kind of testing tech support side was Sub-Zero Mythologies.
oh,
Or wait,
yes.
which came first, MK4 or Sub-Zero Mythologies?
They were
It was kind of hand in hand, right?
they were hand in hand, and I think again they came out kind of close, approximate time. Mortal Kombat Mythologies was more of a story-based game, and Mortal Kombat 4 was the latest. Oh gosh, yeah. So yeah, it was more of a story-based game. It used full motion video of a lot of the Mortal Kombat live actors, because Mortal Kombat, the original games, all used digitized actors that filmed in front of green screens and such. And yeah, whenever you die, the Sega CD, I'm not Sega CD version. We've moved on in tech. The PlayStation version would show Sub-Zero going ah, and after hours of struggling with those fiddly controls and having 6 other people sitting around you, and you hear Sub-Zero screaming day in and day out for months. So, and then of course the infamous turn button, which we begged the higher ups to take out, but they wouldn't. And sure enough, the reviews deemed that, and it was just, it conceptually it was cool. It was an interesting story, and I think the little movies were a little cheesy, but then at the same time, that cheese also made them work so well, and they were fun. I mean, they were fun to watch everybody do their little moments. Oh, Quan Chi.
You see, Sub-Zero. You can trust
a sorcerer sometimes. I will never get that script out of my head. I wasn't even in the thing, and I will never get that script out of my head.
Well, when you're playing it day in, day out, you know, when we're taking the N64 cartridges, which are like this big, and sticking devil faces on them and little coffee stirrers and setting them up, and
we were sticking like post note faces and
pegging them with koosh balls across the room.
We'd line up like dominoes. Oh my God, we were so young and wild.
Yeah, the Wild West days of the Corsicana Tech Support Office. Some of the best days of my life, honestly. And Mortal Kombat was a big part of that. You know, I have Mortal Kombat to thank for having a job opening. You know, its popularity created a huge company, and in tech support, they needed more people to handle the calls. And because on top of all the Mortal Kombats, you know, there's all the other Midway stuff. And in fact, fun fact, for a few years, if you called the Midway tip line, you heard me. I was the voice on the automated system.
I could quote you too.
Press 1 for Mortal Kombat! Press 2 for NFL Blitz. Press 3 for Doom. Press 4 to... I forget where it goes on from there, but I had such a great time recording that. I'm sure people got tired of my Mortal Kombat screaming. It's like, exactly. After a while, it just becomes like, oh my God, please skip.
Oh, that actually reminded me of 2 stories. Mythologies and that reminded me of 2 stories. Because I remember, like, shortly after Mortal Kombat 3 came out, you know, the way game counseling was, because we were game counselors and unofficial, not entitled, but we were testers as well. And the way it was decreed is we could only give out 3 characters per call, because in retrospect it makes sense, because these people would have us on the phone all day, and that's not to say that they didn't try, but yeah, they'd call for like 3 moves, and it's like, I can only give you 3 characters today, and sure enough they call back, and it's like, no, it hasn't been 24 minutes, much more 24 hours. So because it was like a constant flood. It was like I went from 9 to 5 to like 8 to midnight on days, because it was just in 7 days a week, where I used to enjoy my weekends off. I remember there were so many calls, and I can blame Toby for this. I started having nightmares about people calling, and like my nightmare was somehow they found my home number and started calling me at home, and like literally it was prophetic, because it was the night after I got up, and I was like, you know, half asleep, hair all wild in my boxers, and I'm like waking up, and one of my roommates is like, Guy, there's someone on the phone for you. And I'm like, who is it? And they're like, I don't know, they kept asking for you specifically. And it's like, okay, hello, what's the move for Sub-Zero? And I could just feel this chill go down me. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. Hello? And I called them, and I like screamed at all of them. I was just screaming bloody murder. But then shortly after that, Mortal Kombat Trilogy came out, which was like a culmination of the first three games, and like all the characters and different versions of that. And I remember going to E3 '96. That was my first E3 ever. And again, being a gamer, that was like my other Disneyland.
Right.
It was just amazing. And of course, at that point, you really see the scope of how big Mortal Kombat is, and especially because it was still like insane. Because I mean, there was the movie that came out and the live show, and I remember at that show, Carrie was there, Carrie Hoskins, who played Sonya Blade in Mortal Kombat, and she was there promoting War Gods at the time, and that was fun because I've maintained a friendship with Carrie for over 20 years now, and she was gracious enough to grant us an interview here on the show,
Yeah.
which was super cool, and always appreciate talking with her.
And if you haven't
But
watched it, we'll link it at the end of this video. So when you're done watching this, be sure to go over there and watch our talk, or TGL talks with Carrie Hoskins, because it's a great view. It's a lot of fun.
and she makes it a point to sass me at the end of the interview.
Oh, you got so sassed, it's not even funny. She called you out.
Yes, she did. That's what friends are for.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a big year. It was, the years Nintendo 64 came out, so that was equally big with Super Mario 64. And then, like you said, we did Mortal Kombat 4 and Mortal Kombat Mythologies. Mortal Kombat 4. That was interesting.
It was, and that was kind of my first E3. Was MK Gold was like the big title of the show. They had all the actors there that they could round up, so I got a chance to meet Carrie that year, as well as John Turk and Leah Montalongo. They're just all a bunch of great guys and gals. And MK Gold was the big thing, which was MK4 for Dreamcast, and it looked and played better than the arcade, and I mean it was the definitive version of MK4. If you're gonna play it, play MK Gold.
Mm-hmm.
But this led to kind of some of the dark side of working in the industry and being low on the totem pole. Is that there was a huge witch hunt after that E3.
Mortal Kombat 4 for Nintendo 64 and PlayStation.
Mm-hmm. But the witch hunt that happened was the codes got out on how to unlock Goro and all the cheats. Yeah, that guy.
That's the source of all our pain.
We had been gathered into a room, and they were like, "We won't fire you. Just come forward. We know one of you did it." And we're like, "We didn't do anything, honestly, And the witch hunt just went on for a while until they discovered some random player figured a code out. Yeah, at E3 and posted it. This was kind of the beginning of the internet, so it got out there, and they finally, called the dogs off. We never got an apology or anything, but
no. I mean, what do you expect? It was like press both shoulder buttons and press start. I mean, it's not like rocket science here. It's a pretty simple code, and I remember they changed it for one, but couldn't get around to changing it for the other. But yeah, it was confess now and you won't be fired. And they had like the higher ups, like we were like in conversations with like Ed Boon and like all those higher ups, and it was just they wanted our heads.
Oh yeah.
And like they were absolutely convinced that we did it, and it was just some kid who figured it out on the show floor. And when we figured him out, I think we turned the phones off to like track down this guy. And then back then the internet wasn't as accessible. So we found the guy in some Mortal Kombat forum, and his thing was like, "Oh yeah, that was me. Can I have a job?" And we're like, "No." So
yeah, we already hate you. There's no way you're getting a job.
Oh, and that leads to all of our many special.
Oh yes.
we weren't just game counselors. We actually ended up being counselors for a lot of these kids that called us.
Because they were like us. You know, their life was video games for the most part. You know, big portion of my childhood, if I wasn't reading a book, I was playing a game. You know, and I was the guy. I called Nintendo tip line. I can't tell you how many times, and developed a relationship with the counselors there. So I completely got what was happening when I was the counselor now, and you'd have the old stalwarts, you know.
Yeah.
So it's some of the more memorable characters for you.
Oh God, yeah. Because like I said, it was just like it stopped going from "Can I have the code for Raiden" to "How was your day?
Yeah.
What did you learn at school today? How are your parents doing? What's your brother up to?" And it turned into that kind of relationship. But there were some oddballs. I'm going to reference Toby again, but he was talking to some guy, and he gave the 3-character code limit. We finally got that abolished because it was like, look, you can find this stuff on the internet. You don't need us on that, but never like deterred anybody. But so Toby's talking to this one guy, gives the 3 things, and all of a sudden the guy sits there silently for a second, and then he goes, "I have outdone your Liu Kang," and that was his voice because Toby put on a speakerphone, and he's like, "I have outdone your Liu Kang. I have a character named Panzer, who is a 7'7" green cyber cat." And okay, cool. There was
good on him.
There was tell about the one with the bag on his head.
Oh yeah, so I kept getting this one caller, and he might have been the same guy as some other stuff, but this one particular thing this guy would do is he would perform an animality, put a blanket over his head, and then try to guess what animal they turn into, and then call us and see if he guessed correctly. And this went on for a while. This wasn't just like a one-time thing. And for some reason, I kept getting them. I don't know if you guys were transferring them to me every
Transfer
time.
440.
But yeah, I got him a few times. And yeah, he guessed scorpions. Yeah, he turned into a giant scorpion. Big surprise there.
Wow!
Whoa!
What are the odds?
But he might have been the same guy who called and he wanted...
Alexander the Great?
I think it was Alexander the Great, because he wanted to he wanted a cobra to put in his pit that he had dug and put spikes in or something, and he wanted to know if he could mail it to me or to us at the tech support office, and if we had changed the labeling on the packaging and resend it to him, because cobras were illegal to own there, but apparently not here. He had done some research, and
you think?
Thought we would do that. No, we're not gonna do that.
And then there was the guy who could morph into you.
Oh yes. So as I mentioned, I was the voice on the tech support line before you got to a live counselor, and this guy had called so much. He had memorized it. And I was actually out the day this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys, I mean, when I came in the next day, you guys were like, "You won't believe." And like everybody just like had this look on their face like, "Oh my God, you won't believe it, this guy." Morphed into you.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, what? So you said a number. And
no, like you could press like on the old phones, you could like press like 1 or 2 or whatever, and each one has a different like musical tone.
Right.
And like you could press it, and like you hit 5, but you don't tell him, and you'd hit it, and he would recognize the musical tone, and verbatim, in Kaiser's voice, would ramble off the entire script. God knows how many times he listened to the entire phone system.
Yeah. Which brought on another problem and some other interesting calls, is that while we weren't a 900 number, we weren't making money off of this. We were a long distance call for anybody that
Mhm.
wasn't, local. So we would get calls. Thank you for calling Midway Home Entertainment. What kind of entertainment? Oh,
Video
video games?
games?
Is like, I'm guessing you have a child who plays video games. Ooh, I'm gonna tear that boy's ass. I'm like, and then the click, and then you're sitting there like, holy shit, what happened?
Do you remember the kid who hit the other kid because he was overweight, and then he got sent to the principal's office and called us from the principal office's phone?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, hello, it's me.
What's it sound
He,
like?
this guy was our most regular caller, like hands down. I think we knew his entire biography, and he would call and want to know the meg sizes of Nintendo games because they still use cartridges.
And he
And
never would play PlayStation because they were disc, and he refused to go disc. He
yeah,
only played cartridges.
I don't know how he survives in this modern world of digital games and CDs.
I don't, but he daily and multiple times a day, because he would call and he'd get one of us, and then he'd call again and he'd get another one, and then we would, sometimes if it wasn't too busy, we'd be like, we could hear the conversations, like, damn it, Chip's calling, it's like, hey, I just talked to him, cut him. Oh, I said his
Hey, yeah.
name. But
Uh,
yeah, always wanted to know the meg size, wanted to know what it sounded like, and how true it was to the arcade, because he was a big arcade gamer,
mhm.
and that was what the bigger meg size and the sound quality is. How well did it replicate that arcade experience? So that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
That he was that passionate about it, but my God, and it turned
daily.
daily, multiple times daily, and we weren't the only people he were calling. It turns out, when I went was moved to the San Diego office, I found out that my supervisor in testing there, whose background was he was in Nintendo tech support, um, knew the guy. We'd start telling these stories. He goes, "Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, we blocked him."
I-
And I'm like, wow, how long has he been calling? And how many different companies does he call?
who knows? And then, of course, there was the general ones who would want to know everything about every single character. Like, they couldn't accept that some of these characters didn't have, like, last names.
Right.
So we had to come up with unofficial, official names for them.
Because they didn't know that we were just tech support. They just thought we're the guys that made the games.
Yeah, they thought we were the ones. Yeah.
Yeah, they called it. It's like, oh, hey, and so they knew we knew, but we didn't.
Yeah,
Because they
and they
didn't
wouldn't
exist.
accept that there was no. It was a one name only. So we came up with a pretty nice list, and I actually made a note of a couple of them. There was Sub Zero, who was actually Dave Sub Zero Johnson.
Right. There was Rain Papadopoulos.
Yes, Shiva Huxtable, Raiden Harris, Reptile Peterson, Motaro Oglesby, Kano McGillicuddy was one of my personal favorites.
That's
Goro Fitzgerald. A lot of people now were apparently of Irish origin in our narrative. Shanat Knops.
Shinakonops.
Shanat Knops. Cyrax Jones, Cabal Menendez, and we tell these names. We had like a list of default list. It's like, oh, they're asking names. Okay, it's Cabal Menendez. That's his name. And then one of my personal favorites, because we get calls about the movies too. Like, yes, we had anything to do with those. And there at the end of the first Mortal Kombat movie, there was Shao Kahn, and he had, I don't know why they chose this makeup look for him, but they did. He had this really dry, cracked face, and people were like, "Why is his face like that?" And I said, "Well, you see, he was really tired one morning when he was eating his oatmeal, and he fell asleep, and his face went down in the bowl, and his underlings woke him up, and when Shao Kahn sat up, he had all this oatmeal all over his face that had dried, but being his underlings, I mean, they're not going to tell him. He's going to hit them with a sledgehammer, so they just didn't say anything and just let him go out to threaten all these Earthrealm people, and just left him like that. And the kid's like, oh, okay. And this is the crazy stuff that we told them. Although we did get the costume from Mortal Kombat Annihilation, we got the Sub-Zero movie costume, and I might have put that on a lot and ran around town a lot
I
with
might have
Sub-Zero,
videotaped some of that happening
a lot.
a lot. Baltimore, one of the geeks here, there exists a fun Sub-Zero voguing video because Vogue was all the rage at the time.
Yes, it was. And I remember driving through the Jack in the Box drive-through in full Sub-Zero gear, and I asked for a cup, and they said, "Do you want ice?" I said, "No, thank you. I can make my own." And then we drive off, and they just look at me because I have this blue linen clay mask, and there we played these games so much. It was like we get so good, it would stop being a challenge for us. I remember the president of our company, he was a patient man with us. Oh, he was so patient with us. One day he was bringing people, some high executives, in for a tour, and of course we were separate from our first incarnation of Williams was Midway was the main administration was over in one building, and they put all these 19-year-old kids in another building. What could possibly go wrong? And I remember the president of our company walked in with all these high-ranking people, and I'm hanging upside down off the top of the Mortal Kombat 3 arcade, and I'm playing with Sonya Blade because Sub-Zero and Sonya were my two mains, and I beat Shao Kahn. And I remember you guys were crowding around me, cheering on while I'm hanging upside down, and he walks in, and his usual default thing, he kind of look at us like he was going to say something, and then he just 180 pivot and then just walk away. And that was it. That was his thing. And I learned how to play Doom with the steering wheel. I learned how to play Mortal Kombat with the steering wheel. A couple quick left turns of the wheel and press the gas pedal. I can make Scorpion throw his spear.
Because you got to get creative, and you have to test those when you're testing. You have to test all the ancillary products that are available for the system, or at least the first-party stuff, to make sure it doesn't crash the game. Because sometimes it does. Sometimes, the Enforcer was plugged in, and the game crashes on the loading screen. Well, I don't know if that really happened, but I feel like that was a problem with some game at some point in my testing career.
There was Mortal Kombat 3 did not work with one of the earlier make models of the Genesis. I think it's 1000, and it worked okay with 1001. I might have that juxtaposed, but I do remember that one model didn't work with Mortal Kombat 3, and I think that'd do a revision because all these people called us, and of course we did it to their game, and that was the whole thing. And
oopsie.
Yeah, oopsie. So
that was our Corsicana kind of Mortal Kombat experiences. At one point, I did, like I mentioned earlier, move to San Diego. I never did test on any of the Mortal Kombat games there, and then I eventually got into internal development, producing and writing and doing some game design stuff. But Mr. Chuckles here, he's...
Mr. Chuckles?
I don't know.
What the hell is that? I'm not an ape. I'm not Bobo. Bobo Chuckles.
I meant to say Chapman. It came out Chuckles. Just rolled off the tongue. I do apologize.
You confuse me sometimes. You really do.
His picture is in Mortal Kombat. His...
Two of them, actually.
Two pictures or two Mortal Kombats?
Two Mortal Kombats.
That's right.
In the crypt, because they were super in depth with that crypt thing where you could go get little coins and get all these pictures and stuff. In Crypt SD for Mortal Kombat 5 Deadly Alliance and Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, you can see my pictures on the SD crypts along with the rest of the testing team. I was the assistant lead on Mortal Kombat 5, and I was flattered that they had me be one of the co-leads for it because I had a lot of experience with Mortal Kombat, and I was the guy that's no, Reptile's blood is green. This is where this character is from. If it's a Robo Ninja, they have to have black oil. They don't bleed. And it was little minutia like that that I had to constantly go in and check, make sure all the mythology is correct and the story elements. One of the things that I convinced them to keep in was in Mortal Kombat 5, you could throw weapons. You could pick up weapons, or no, I'm sorry. One of your things was you had multiple forms of fighting, but one of them was a weapon. And some characters could throw weapons, and only some characters could, like, if you threw the weapon, it would stick in them and bleed them out. It's not supposed to do that, but I thought that was such a cool feature, and especially with the vicious nature of Mortal Kombat, I was like, I pushed really hard to make sure that stayed in. So that was one of,
pretty cool, yeah.
and I had an interesting relationship because at that point Midway was kind of reaching the end of its career lifespan, in the sense of they were starting to show signs of having financial issues, so they let people off and bring them back. It was like an abusive relationship.
I had worked my way up through the company to a point where I was working on some games, and that was a dream come true. And then I was writing the story and working with the teams and the artist, and then they canceled the project because another game was further along in development, and they needed to get it done in time for the holidays, so they had to shift the money and some personnel to finish that game, and everybody else was like, bye-bye. So that's what happened to Weasel and the 2 Justice League games I was working on, and I can't remember if there's another game in development back there.
Well, there was Blitz the League, which somehow survived.
Well, that was an internal San Diego, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was... It wasn't Freaky Flyers.
Freaky Flyers was the game that they
saved.
That they saved and
Dr. Muto? Was it Dr. Muto?
That was Milpitas.
Okay.
Because that was Ed Logg's game.
Yes. Okay. Wasn't the Seven Studios thing with Defender, was it, or Legion?
No.
Legion came out in the summer, but yeah, that's a whole thing.
Yeah, those are all parts of the beginning of the end.
Yeah, and I was periodically brought back and forth, and that was an interesting story. And then I was brought back one more time to work on Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, which, from a gameplay standpoint, was far better. It was a 2-player brawler with Kung Lao and Liu Kang, and it was set within the Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 time frame, which I think internally they were getting, hey, everyone loves Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3, but it's the stuff past that people are struggling with. And what is that? Is that your E3 badge?
That's my E3 badge.
Yes, all those little silly stickers on it. I think we're like, yeah, there's us on that far one over there.
Yep.
And so it was a much better game, but man, I don't know what was up with the story, because they kind of present... Someone must have really loved Dude, Where's My Car? Because they turned Liu Kang and Kung Lao into the biggest dude bros ever, and it was like the story was pretty like slangy, silly, a lot of very obvious in-jokes, I guess, on their side. And Cabal, for some reason, they decided to make sound like Elvis. Okay, sure, why not? And it was a good game. I think if you had taken the story from Sub-Zero and the gameplay from Shaolin Monks, you would have had a great game. If you had just managed to merge those two things in. But that was the last game I worked on, Mortal Kombat and in general. And at that point, we were both civilians in the Mortal Kombat world, and it wasn't too much longer after Midway folded up and was acquired by Warner Brothers.
Right. And you'd think, even though our careers with Midway ended and then Midway ending, that there might be some bitterness to it. You get laid off. But Mortal Kombat's Mortal Kombat. And so when they righted the ship, 4 and 5 and
6
and 7.
Which, none of which, I'll be honest, I just didn't care for any of those.
Yeah, like Armageddon, I played a little bit of on the Wii, because that was the first MK to create your own character, and that was kind of cool, so I played around with that a bit. But when MK9 dropped, when NetherRealm solidified itself as its own studio, and had time to do, not trying to crank out You
As
know,
many as they
as many as
could.
they
They
could.
make orders and please public investors.
Right. MK9 drops, which they just called Mortal Kombat because they're rebooting the series basically, and that's what the storyline was. It was MK9, but went back to the beginning, and I fell in love with Mortal Kombat again. You know,
Oh yeah,
as bitter as Sub-Zero and Special Forces left me, I never even touched Shell and Monks, which I do hear it's fun. I just,
Mhm.
I was kind of out of it, MK at the time. Deadly Alliance I liked a little bit. I liked the changing the stances and having the weapon. But I think
They
once,
changed the gameplay too much. It
yeah, once
felt like something that
Deception
wasn't.
hit, and they were going crazy with the combat cart and puzzle combat and combat
Yes,
chess, and when they should have just been focusing on the core game. Not that those other little side things didn't have a right to exist, but it,
focus on the gameplay before you start putting in the cute stuff.
yeah, and
Uh,
this is backseat game deving here, but
yeah, of course, of
um,
course. I felt they started getting it right when they did the Mortal Kombat versus DC universe, which a lot of people gave a lot of crap to because it wasn't as bloody and violent. But I think what a lot of people missed is they got the gameplay more true to form and was
right.
also kind of a template engine for Mortal Kombat moving forward.
Mhm.
And it was also cool seeing, Batman and Sub-Zero fight and Scorpion and Superman and things like that. It was interesting and cool, and it was fun again.
Yeah, I love the MK versus DCU, and am hoping that the recent Injustice 2 with the inclusion of Sub-Zero and Raiden, other than just being, Mortal Kombat's 25th year anniversary and showing, a little Mortal Kombat love in there, that I'm hoping that's kind of alluding to the next MK versus DC, because I loved it. I don't get butthurt because there weren't fatalities. I mean, honestly, with getting into like MKX, the last true Mortal Kombat game that came out, it's so graphic and so violent that it went from kind of like this almost B movie schlock horror to like watching Faces of Death.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, ooh, it's still cool. And I played it, and I played the hell out of it, and beginning to end, and all that, and got all the DLC characters in the MKXL pack. But I wouldn't hate them stepping back from the gore and focusing more on just that frantic Mortal Kombat gameplay that you see in the Injustice games.
Mhm.
To do that in another MK versus DC.
Yeah. There was a lot of things that Mortal Kombat 2011 and Mortal Kombat X or 10 did right. I mean, that I'm not a big reboot fan, but I felt the reboot was necessary for that because they had gotten so far off track by the time Armageddon came out that it was convoluted as everything, and I felt like they went back again. They realized Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3 were their strongest games, so they kind of reestablished that, put all the beloved characters back. And I remember when Mortal Kombat X hit, they set it 20 years later after the events of the first game. And that was actually really resonant to me in the sense that it was 20 years ago when I started my personal journey with Mortal Kombat. So it was like it was weird in that sense, like the characters and I all suddenly just grew up together and we're now all older
Yeah.
and still fighting. I'm fighting the control and they're fighting in the game, and it was a weird, surreal moment, and it just reminded me that I've spent over 20 years, almost the entirety of the Mortal Kombat phenomenon, either playing or involved directly. The relationships I built with, that was one thing. It's like uh, working at the Texas office at Midway. I can honestly say, looking back all this time, I've never had another job like it. It was a fun environment. They became family, and while I've certainly worked with people I've enjoyed, I don't think I've ever loved the collective group like I did Midway, Texas. I still talk to them. I still talk to all of them, and it's just it was a very surreal moment realizing that all these coworkers, friends, family, whatever, have watched me grow up from this 19-year-old kid to not a 19-year-old. It's a sweet moment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not 19 anymore. It's 25 years ago. It's-
Yeah. It still stays around. They keep talking about a new Mortal Kombat movie. I loved the first one in '95. It was so cheesy. It was that TNT level cheese.
we all went and saw it, and
Oh yeah,
that the soundtrack made that movie so much that just the dragon flame and the dot 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 dot.
non-stop techno.
You were
Techno.
you were in. Yeah, that was, yeah. Techno was in everything at that point, but this was very well done.
Mhm.
I mean, everybody knows the Mortal Kombat music from the movie, like that tune.
Yeah, and
Um,
then there was the second movie.
yeah,
Pretty cool, huh? That's my animality.
Animality.
God, kill me now. um,
Although they did get a more believable Sonya. Uh, Bridget was it not that she was, unpleasant to look at and that her acting was bad, but her fighting was bad.
you
And
don't like Veronica Vaughn from Billy Madison?
no, I don't.
Oh,
Oh, I I just, her as a fighter, it just pulled, I just no. But I love the movie, and
oh
everything
yeah,
when she wasn't fighting, she was fine. So the new
yeah.
Sonya they got in Annihilation, I could say, is the one highlight of that movie.
Yeah, I'd say the most memorable thing about that movie for me was I walked out. I almost walked out after 15 minutes of it. I was like, this sucks a lot. And they're like, what did you think? It's like, yeah, what did I think? But yeah, it's like they Mortal Kombat's had its off moments. Special Forces was its own remarkable creature. It
Yeah,
was supposed to be Sonya and Jax, and then they removed Sonya. And I remember that E3, everyone's like, "Oh, look, it's Sonya!" And it was I can't remember the girl's name, and bless her, she's just there to do a gig, but it wasn't Carrie. I'm like, that's not her. Stop lying, you know. And then Mortal Kombat Advance, which you remember that quote far better than I do.
so the first zero given in EGM was to Mortal Kombat Advance. And
Yes,
the reviewer, and I can say I didn't test it, I didn't work on it, I had nothing to do with that. So
that
I'm
was
not,
even before my time, before I
yeah,
moved out there.
so I'm not going to say I'm sorry because that wasn't me. But the reviewer said that he would rather be in jail gargling cat piss than play this game again. Now, that's pretty harsh words,
Yeah,
but it sucked. It's
yeah.
hard. It's hard to pull off stuff on the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance.
I played it after the fact, and it was a game. It turned on. That had that going for it.
Right? It's one of those games where its greatest feature was that you could turn it off.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can put something else in it as opposed to that.
Right?
Um, but yeah, it's just here we are 25 years later, and Mortal Kombat's still going strong. They're still having Mortal Kombat conventions. As far as the actual people, Carrie has been extremely prolific and still all this time promoting Sonya, and she'll still talk and do interviews and do photo ops with people, and she's funny and she's smart and she's just this cool gal that I've been fortunate enough to maintain a friendship with over the years. So
Yeah, and it's just one of those weird things. Growing up, you'd never think you'd be friends with this person. This was just a character in a video game that I played.
nope,
You know,
and
my
she's a real person.
that was my dad. Kind of had that thing where growing up, he loved Billy Jack and he loved Alice Cooper, and then in his adult life, he became friends with Tom Laughlin, who is Billy Jack, and even spoke at
Mhm.
his funeral. And Alice Cooper knew my dad, would see him and know who he was, would say hi. My dad cleaned, the blood off of the severed heads when he was on tour. They would send it to my dad. He'd clean it up and send it back to him.
Paths that we end up taking in our lives.
Yeah.
And I just kind of look back and kind of laugh and say, well, that's just a normal day for me, really.
So, yeah, from here, we're looking forward to the next 25 years,
Yeah.
if Mortal Kombat lasts that long.
Oh, I'm sure they'll find a way. I mean, I'm sure they'll find new ways to pull entrails out through someone's mouth or back. Um, and God, just some of those moves in the last two,
Yeah.
they're coming up with some pretty hardcore stuff, man. I was just like,
Yeah,
God.
those X-ray moves, I love them. Because they're easy to pull off, and they were just as brutal as any fatality.
Oh yeah,
But it was hilarious because as brutal and gruesome as it was, then they're just sitting there back.
yeah. They're just kind of like back to that.
It's
I'm
like,
like,
I just saw your spine shatter.
yeah.
Not
God.
break, shatter.
All I can think is all those parents that used to get pissed off at us for 35 rib cages and 23 arms. Why not 24 to make a full set? But here
Right.
you are. And then like they get pissed off at us about that, and then I'm like, man, you had no idea what was coming. So
We're the captains now.
that's right.
Though I don't have any children. But if I did, I'd let them play Mortal Kombat. It's still silly.
Oh yeah. It's like, here, come look at the kooky stuff I did when I was a kid.
Exactly.
It was a lifestyle.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure sharing our memories with you. I'm sure there's plenty that we left out. We spent years at Midway. We spent years playing Mortal Kombat. Before we were at Midway, we've played Mortal Kombat since then. But we hope this little encapsulation of Pixel Pals is enough to tide you over till the next one.
Exactly.
As always, it's all geek to us.
Happy
Bye.
25 Mortal Kombat.
Best wishes and many more.
I heard there was cake involved with all this. I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I know. Where's the streamers and balloons?
Right?
We totally didn't go all out.
I bought him. Oh, God, what more do you want me to do? He's cute in a big-headed sort of way.
Hey, I put on my 5-year jacket and my San Diego testing name tag and my
Right.
E3 badge.
I've got Sub-Zero holding Elsa. God, that's not love. I don't know what it is. It's dead to me, Dad.
I don't know what love is.